Fox 5 and Hot 97 present a Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers special, Diddy's Downfall.
I'm so glad you're joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers on Diddy, the criminal case. I'm your host, Lisa Evers. We've seen bombshell allegations made against Sean Diddy Combs and even action movie-style raids on his homes. There was silence for months, then suddenly a late-night arrest. And now the man who once ruled a multi-billion-dollar global empire is behind bars with drug kingpins and killers. Is this the end or just the start of an even bigger investigation? News of the arrest of Sean Diddy Combs by federal agents rocked the world. Some believed it was inevitable, but others thought he would find a way out of it like he had other challenges in the past. After all, Combs was once the multi-billionaire ruler of a vast global empire of music, fashion, and entertainment businesses. In the social media storm that followed, the hashtag Diddy Arrested became a trending topic on X, says New York Post lifestyle reporter Asia Grace.
Everyone is weighing in here because Diddy is such a giant in not just the hip hop community, in pop culture overall. There's no area, no level of our society that he hasn't touched, influenced, and been successful in.
For decades, Diddy's glitzy, highly publicized parties attracted an A-list crowd of business moguls and entertainment and sports celebrities. But behind closed doors, prosecutors say there was a different type of private party called a freak-off. The freak-offs involved men and women and paid sex workers who were allegedly drugged, beaten, and forced to participate against their will. The federal indictment charges Combs with racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking, and prostitution. It's a RICO case, so if convicted, Diddy is looking at 30 years to life behind bars. The feds have a strong case, says criminal defense attorney Philip Hamilton.
It's a tough case. There's no way, no matter how much power he's had, how much money he's had, how much influence he's had, that he can walk into that federal courthouse and say, this is going to be a breeze. It's not. This is going to be a difficult case, and it's going to be a fight.
Many people express shock at the level of depraved violence alleged in the criminal complaint. But rumors have been circulating for a long time in the hip-hop community, says hip-hop journalist Mark Elibert, who works for Complex and other platforms.
We have to do a better job at, one, protecting these people and protecting this industry from these people who are allegedly committing heinous acts, because they're using such a beautiful culture that created right here in the Bronx and using it to do something terrible. And that's not what hip hop is about.
There's a lot to unpack with all the major developments. Let's take it to our panel. Joining me is Asia Grace. She's a lifestyle reporter for the New York Post. Asia, great to have you with us again.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. Also with us is Mark Elibert. He's a hip-hop journalist for Complex and other platforms. Mark, great to have you back with us.
Hey, Lisa, what's going on?
It's all good. It's all going on for sure. We're going to get into it too, definitely. Also with us is Philip Hamilton. He's a criminal defense attorney and managing partner with Hamilton Clark LLP. Phil, thank you for being with us once again.
It's always good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
We appreciate it. Phil, first of all, how serious is this case?
Extremely serious. We went through this a couple of years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, when we had the R. Kelly trial, right? And, we know ultimately what his sentence ended up being. And in large part, it's because there was a RICO conspiracy involved and there were allegations of sex trafficking involved that spanned the course of many years, many victims, and the like. Essentially, even though from a factual standpoint, it's a bit more nuanced with Diddy, from a legal standpoint, he's essentially, and I'm speaking from more of a lay perspective here, he's essentially facing the same charges. When I'm looking at this indictment, and I think what his federal sentencing guidelines will most likely be, when we think about all of the enhancements, some of the nature of the conduct that I've seen, within the four corners of the indictment, I don't see how he would be looking at anything less than 30 to life here.
It doesn't get more serious than that, 30 to life. Asia Grace, you're a lifestyle reporter. You mix and mingle with all kinds of people every single day. What was the reaction when people heard that he was finally arrested?
Well, things have truly become rough for Puff. I mean, he virtually has gone from making the band to like playing a harmonica in a jail cell, or at least a beat. This is a day that a lot of pop culture connoisseurs and contributors, including Diddy himself, likely never expected to see. He was this larger than life figure, this mogul who had millions, music, models, you name it. And now his life hangs in the balance. There's a lot of shock and disappointment, especially when people are looking at the allegations and some of the alleged evidence that surfaced, including that very alarming video between him and Cassie from 2016. People can't believe that this person that was on this pedestal for decades upon decades, since I was a little girl, is now having this very public and very nightmarish downfall.
Yeah, a big nightmare. Mark, in terms of the hip hop community, there's been an incredible amount of silence. I mean, very few people coming forward to even want to be affiliated with him in any way. He lost a lot of business, but what's the sense that you're getting of what people are saying in the hip hop community?
It's just an influx of emotions. There's people who are trying to figure it out. There's people who are happy that some justice is being found. There's others who are sad because this is a respected hip hop figure that so many people looked up to, myself included. And we're seeing like this is what was allegedly going on behind closed doors. And it's like, all right, he knows so many other people. He's helped so many other people. Are other people involved in this? So it's just a weird period right now in hip hop. We're trying to figure out, and we're trying to just hopefully we get the answers to what's going on.
Bill, in terms of the actual allegations, one of the issues that came up in the first, at his arraignment, the lawyers talking about consensual sex versus sex trafficking. Where do you draw the line, or where do they draw the line legally with that?
I mean, you could look directly in the indictment. If you look at count 2, it just discusses sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. All right. And that force, fraud, or coercion, that is a very important element that in many respects can take this over a consensual component and then over to an illegal component where you're now looking at 30 to life. And it goes a little bit deeper. I think that reference that you're discussing, he was trying to break down the relationship that Diddy had with Cassie, right? Which, frankly, I don't even know if at a bail hearing you really want to be going deep into those facts, because as we know, and as has already been discussed here, that case is in large part the crux of what opened all of this up. Once Cassie brought that suit and Diddy didn't settle the day before, when probably looking back retrospectively, he should have. Once it opened up all the doors to people seeing the money that Cassie got and realizing that he was vulnerable at that point, he wasn't all powerful, that they would be able to come in and get their justice, be able to get retribution, and be able to get monetary means from him. It opened up those doors and it put him in a position now where he's having to fight back. And so even though his attorney was focusing much more so on Cassie, there's a number of victims here that you can't necessarily use the consensual component, especially when we have, rampant allegations of drug use, when we have rampant allegations of force and threats, and him using his power as a means to keep people quiet. It kind of obviously goes a little bit beyond consensual when we start to think about a lot of those factors.
There's still more ahead. Stay with us. Phil, one of the questions that I've been getting on my social media, on my Instagram in particular, people are asking, those allegations in that indictment, they mentioned starting at 2008. People are going like, how can they go back more than 15 or 16 years to bring a case? Isn't there some kind of statute of limitations on this?
Generally, there is a statute of limitations. More specifically, with respect to these charges, there aren't. And the specific reason for that is because, again, Diddy's charged with a racketeering RICO conspiracy, which means that the government is alleging that he was running an organization that had the purpose of ultimately conducting criminal activity, carrying out criminal acts. And because of that, there's an exception to what normally is there as a 5-year statutory statute of limitations, right? That's what's typically there. But what happens when you have this ongoing criminal activity within the scope of an enterprise or an organization is that you can start to go back a while. Think back again to the R. Kelly case, right? In that case, which was tried in 2022, you had a lot of testimony regarding what was happening with R. Kelly and Aaliyah back in 1994 and 1995, which went even further back in time than some of these allegations that we're dealing with respect to Diddy. But that's because the government, as in R. Kelly's case, charged him with running an organization that's purpose was to bring all kinds of women to Illinois and let him do whatever he was going to do that was illegal. And then that's why he ended up serving that time. Well, analogously, what's being said here is that between New York and LA, Diddy was running a like organization that had the purposes of transporting, women and men across state lines, which then is what gave it the federal nexus over a course of time that because that was the aim of the, racketeering conspiracy, that's what allows them to go beyond 5 years. And they can go back to 2018, 2017, 2016, because it's been an ongoing conspiracy. So as long as the government can prove that it's been ongoing, that's what will allow them to ultimately surpass the statute of limitations and continue forward with this prosecution.
Asia, it seems like there's also kind of like a break in the timeline too, in terms of things, because during the New York years, the late 90s, the early 2000s, when he was operating a lot in New York, he was somebody that you would see everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, Diddy, Puff Daddy, Puff, however you know him, he was truly the man behind the magic of it all. He definitely played a massive role in putting hip hop on the map. He really was the king of hip hop. I mean, here his label Bad Boy was the machine behind Biggie Smalls, who's one of the greatest rappers of all times. I mean, he was using throwback hits and making them into 90s joints, and Mariah Carey, and you name it. He's had the top of the top with his name attached to it. And honestly, there was never an arena that he couldn't not only just play in, but dominate in. So now with this all coming out, and some of us remembering some of the headlines he made back in the day that weren't so great, concerning the club issue in the late 90s and just other things that he's been involved in, it seems like a lot of people, especially on social media, are taking off their rose-colored glasses and saying, well, what really was going on all those years ago? We were singing the songs and wearing the clothes and drinking the drinks, but was there something that we were just completely blind to?
Mark, what about like any soul searching going on? You think about people in the hip hop community going, wait a minute, did I miss this? How did I miss this?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who are, I guess, trying to come to the facts and what's going on right now. Like, all right, this was going on, and is this connected to other things? Like, I remember Marlon Wayans did a conversation with Shannon Sharp, and Shannon Sharp asked him, he's like, yo, did you go to Diddy parties? And he was like, yeah, I went, but I had already left. And it's like things like that. I wonder if people are thinking like, damn, if I had stayed and I saw something, would I have said something? But then again, we have this veil over hip hop where it's like, if you see something, don't say something. Like, we're not going to snitch. So we're having another challenge of that idea now. Like, should we say something? I saw that Meek Mill went on a rant, and we know how connected he is to Diddy. So people are asking Meek, did you see anything? What's going on here? He's not saying anything. People are wondering about French Montana, who's actually was signed to Bad Boy Records, and Diddy was touting him as that next guy out of New York. It's like, okay, if you work so closely with him, did you see anything? Like, we're at a point right now where like we really have to decide, like, all right, we have to cut this no snitching thing out because people's lives are affected. So I just hope that, people in hip hop and the entertainment industry can continue or start doing that soul searching and understand, like, this is the business, but like human lives are more important than what this business is giving us.
Mark, what are some of your concerns about this?
My concerns, honestly, is the people who were around him, because they said that him and Cassie were dating for so long, and Cassie tried to settle out of court with him. He didn't want to do it. All this blew up. And they said that they have the footage of all the freak offs that he was having. Phil, I want to ask you if somehow Cassie is in those videos, allegedly helping him out or recruiting women to come and do whatever it is, can the court system bring her back in and connect her to it, even though?
That's a great point, Phil. What about the question Mark's raising? If Cassie, I mean, and also you're raising the issue of the video too, because we are all talking about this one single video that was released last May, that horrific one of Cassie being beaten by Diddy, that Diddy acknowledged and apologized for, that as one video. But if there's as many videos as the prosecutors allege, or even others of maybe celebrities, of maybe, who knows, or that Cassie's in some of them, they were together for 10 years. What impact does that have on her credibility as being their star witness?
I can promise you, even without having been there, not having been in any part of the grand jury proceedings, that as the government started this investigation, they were having discussions, I promise you, with Cassie in regards to that. To the extent that they've seen these videos, which 100% we know that they have, if they saw anything in there that would look like Cassie was taking a managing role or a leader type of role in these freak offs or in some of the criminal conduct that's charged. You can imagine that conversations were had with her. I'm not in any way saying that she's a cooperating witness or anything along those lines from the perspective of when people are signed up as cooperators or snitches. But at the end of the day, when you read the indictment, you don't have to see Cassie's name within the indictment to know that victim one is in fact Cassie. Clearly, she's participating ultimately in this investigation. She most likely, in the event that it does go to trial, will be a star witness. And so I think in regards to her being cooperative, in terms of her opening the door to all of this, let's just imagine it was any other case and you had a witness like that that came forward that would say that I was manipulated into this leadership role, I was manipulated into being an organizer. You can start to imagine where immunity would be given so long as you're helping the government move forward with this prosecution.
And then Asia, the one at the crux of this also too is a lot of abuse of women. How do you think that this abuse that were mostly female victims? They were saying in court, the prosecutors, that some of these young women and some of the underage women were actually drugged for days and kept awake for days so that they could participate in these freak offs, horrific type of behavior. Do you think that there's any way that they could be swayed from not finding him guilty when they hear stuff like that?
I mean, it's very shocking what's being alleged, and the fact that some of these alleged victims went through this is horrific. I don't think that any argument can really change the mind of someone who's hearing a young lady cry and describe what she went through and describe the trauma she still deals with. I will say, though, the silver lining in all of this very dark and ugly conversation is that victims who may not have anything to do with Diddy at all are using social media and other platforms to speak up about what they went through. They're no longer afraid to hold their truths in because now the conversation has been opened up, and they're saying, hey, if Cassie and the like can speak out against somebody as big and as powerful and as wealthy as a Diddy, then maybe I can speak out when it comes to the person who abused me or who mistreated me or who drugged me, whatever the case might be.
Asia, in terms of the news cycle, in terms of things that happen, our awareness of situations, our awareness of wrongdoing, what role do you think this is going to play in this saga, basically, this criminal saga?
I think that social media has definitely played a role in a number of massive and major cases that we've seen. People are weighing in with their thoughts and opinions. We see court reporters bringing to-the-minute news updates onto Twitter and TikTok. So this has now become a part of our everyday experience, our universe. But honestly, if you put it all in one big ball, I do think that there's just a level of disenchantment. A lot of people on social media, a lot of people that I've spoken with, and people are contributing to the conversation on news, in the news. I just think that, again, we had this inner city boy who made good and had bad boy, put everything on the map, and then to have now these conversations and these revelations and allegations come out, it's disheartening.
Mark, what about takeaways within the hip hop community from this?
Again, we got to understand that, again, it's all allegations, but we've been hearing stuff about Diddy for years, and for some reason we've continued to ignore it and champion him as this guy. And now it's like, all right, it's back again. And now we actually have proof. We have him assaulting Cassie and Cassie coming out with her lawsuit and everybody and all the other lawsuits now. And it's just now it's like, all right, we really need to understand that the music industry isn't what it's cracked out to be, because there's stuff that's going on that we don't know about. And there's people who are quiet that aren't speaking about it, whether they're afraid or whether they're protecting somebody else or whatnot. But I just think now the takeaway from this is that we have to do a better job at, one, protecting these people and protecting this industry from these people who are allegedly committing heinous acts, because they're using such a beautiful culture that created right here in the Bronx and using it to do something terrible. And that's not what hip hop is about. So we got to do a better job at that.
Absolutely. Phil, final word. You want to make a prediction on which way this will go?
The crazy prediction is that at some point he takes a plea, because he sees what happened with R. Kelly and he sees ultimately how that played out. And if I am him and thinking about potentially going to trial and knowing that, again, all of those jurors from up in Westchester and Orange and Dutchess are going to be seeing that video of Cassie running down that hallway and him running after her, don't be surprised if at some point he takes a plea so that he can try to avoid some of that time that R. Kelly got hit with. There's a crazy prediction.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers on the Diddy criminal case. You can watch it again on our Fox 5 NY YouTube page and the Fox Local app. Remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I'm Lisa Evers. Let's push for peace, love, and justice for all.